Have you ever felt a sudden sting after a compliment? Or wondered why a friend keeps forgetting the one specific thing you asked them to do while remembering everything else perfectly fine? It is not an accident. It is a calculated test of your boundaries. Today, we are exposing the 5 subtle signs of passive aggression people use, specifically to find out how much disrespect you will tolerate before you push back. Okay, let's jump right into this. Because honestly, it's absolutely crucial that we reframe how we look at these confusing interactions. You know how it is, right? We so often gaslight ourselves into thinking, oh, they're just being clumsy, or, well, they probably just innocently forgot. But let me tell you, they aren't. What you are actually experiencing here is a deliberate diagnostic exercise. The people pulling this stuff, they are actively testing the fences of your relationship, looking for the weak spots to see exactly what they can get away with. So let's look at sign number 1, the hidden boundary test. This first sign is something pretty much all of us have experienced at least once. It's really the most relatable entry point for boundary testing, the classic backhanded compliment. Notice how perfectly they set the trap here. Someone will drop a line like, "You look so confident today, I am surprised," or maybe, "That presentation was actually really good, I did not expect that from you." On the surface, sure, it sounds positive. It's wrapped up in this sweet little wrapper, but hidden right inside is a quiet, deliberate insult to your confidence. And it's designed so perfectly that if you dare to call it out, well, suddenly you are the one who looks oversensitive. This brings us to the core mechanism that keeps you trapped: plausible deniability. That's the entire function of a backhanded compliment, you see. It literally allows the person saying it to express genuine contempt while maintaining total, utter innocence. Just think about the awful bind this puts you in. If you react, they just throw their hands up in the air and say, "Whoa, hey, I was only complimenting you." But if you stay silent, the insult lands exactly as intended. Either way, they win the game. And what you really need to take away from this explainer is that every single time you let it slide without naming it, you are confirming to them that this specific weapon absolutely works on you. Moving right along to section 2, let's dig deeper into plausible deniability. Building right on top of that concept, we find the joke that just isn't actually funny. This is where real hostility hides perfectly under the protection of comedy. You really have to separate the delivery mechanism from the actual message here. They'll say something incredibly cutting, something that deliberately targets a real insecurity you have or maybe a past mistake you made, and then they instantly frame it as a joke. Humor is their protective shield. But make no mistake, that cutting message inside, that is exactly what they meant to communicate. And if you respond with hurt or confusion, boom, suddenly you're the problem. You're told you can't take a joke or that you're just being way too sensitive. And you know what makes this tactic so effective and honestly so damaging? It's the isolating reality of the group dynamic. If other people are in the room, they might laugh. But let me be clear, that laughter isn't because the joke is genuinely funny. It's because the group has just been made complicit in an act that quietly cost you something real. The person testing your boundaries just successfully recruited the rest of the room to validate their disrespect of you. It's a really tough spot to be in. Which leads us to section 3, the silent punishments. All right, let's accelerate a bit and look at the behavioral slights. These don't rely on words at all. They rely on actions, or more accurately, the lack of actions. Sign number 3 is selective forgetting. This is when someone remembers every single minute detail of conversations that matter to them, but they magically, consistently forget the one specific thing you explicitly asked them to do. Now, please understand this. This is almost never about their memory capacity. Forgetting once? Sure, that's normal human error. But forgetting the exact same request repeatedly while remembering entirely unrelated details perfectly fine? No way. That is not a memory failure. It is a low-risk pattern of disregarding your needs while hiding behind that shield of innocent human error. And remember, patterns are data. They're information about how seriously someone actually takes your boundaries. And that leads right into sign number 4, the sudden chill. This is that withdrawal that arrives completely out of nowhere, without any explanation, right after you express a need. You ask for something entirely reasonable, right? And suddenly, they just become colder, quieter, slightly distant. No actual fight occurred. No direct conflict even happened. But the entire temperature in the relationship has just dropped, and you are left pacing around your living room, wondering if you did something wrong simply by asking for what you needed. You see, this silent withdrawal is really a punishment disguised as a mood, and it is incredibly effective. Through sheer repetition, it teaches you that expressing your needs comes with a harsh social cost. The tester is essentially sitting there watching to see if you will endure the coldness or if you're going to fold. And sadly, when faced with that cost repeatedly, most people eventually learn to just stop asking. They shrink their own boundaries entirely just to keep the peace. All right, let's move to section 4, the diagnostic tool. This brings us to the fifth sign, and this really sets up the major paradigm shift of this entire explainer. Here's exactly how the public dig disguised as concern sounds in practice. Imagine you're in front of an audience, and they say something like, "I just want to make sure you are not overcommitting again like last time," or, "I really hope this goes better than the last project you handled." They deliver these statements with this soft, gentle tone of care, but look at what they are actually doing. They function as quiet, public reminders of your past mistakes. They are designed specifically to diminish your credibility in front of other people without ever looking like a direct attack. It's wild, but they are literally feigning care just to tear you down. So, let's take a step back for a second here. We've covered backhanded compliments, unfunny jokes, selective forgetting, sudden withdrawal, and public digs disguised as concern. What do all of these behaviors actually have in common? Well, here is the clinical reality of the situation. They are diagnostic tools. Every single small act of passive aggression we just walked through is a calculated test. The person doing it is literally sitting back, watching your reaction carefully to determine exactly how much disrespect you will absorb without defending yourself. If you laugh off that backhanded compliment, if you ignore the cruel joke, if you accept the forgetting without a single comment, and if you tolerate that cold withdrawal, well, you've just provided the answer. You have handed over the exact data they were looking for, and that answer determines exactly how much further their behavior is going to escalate in the future. Okay, so section 5, how to actually stop the tests. So how do we finally shut this down? The way out of this pattern is absolutely not to explode. It is not confrontation just for the sake of it. In fact, getting dragged into a dramatic fight actually gives them exactly what they want, because then they can just call you erratic. Instead, we need a sterile, empowering approach to cleanly shut down the emotional manipulation. And you solve this by simply refusing to perform the role that their test requires of you. You do this by naming what happened calmly, without any anger whatsoever, and absolutely without apology. You simply observe the behavior out loud. For a backhanded compliment, you just say, "That was a strange thing to say." For selective forgetting, you say, "I noticed you forgot that again." For a sudden chill, you calmly say, "I am asking you directly instead of guessing what changed your mood." Each of these calm, non-confrontational responses does one incredibly powerful thing. It completely removes the plausible deniability that their passive aggression depends on to survive. You are turning the lights on. A test that no longer produces useful information for the person running it is a test that very quickly stops being worth running at all.